Let me ask you something simple, but oddly revealing. Have you ever been sitting with friends and someone says, "You don't have any tattoos? Not even one?" And the tone isn't judgmental exactly, just surprised. Like you showed up to a costume party in regular clothes. And you laugh it off. Nope. Just never wanted one. But later you wonder, why haven't I? In a world where tattoos have become almost ordinary, symbols of self-expression, rebellion, identity, art, choosing to never get one is quietly unusual. It's not louder. It's not better. It's just different. And here's the part that fascinates me. The decision to never permanently mark your body often reflects deeper psychological traits. Not surface-level preferences, but patterns in how your brain approaches identity, risk, meaning, and time. So let's explore that. First, let's clear something up. Not getting a tattoo doesn't mean you're boring. And getting one doesn't mean you're impulsive. Humans love to simplify each other. But psychology is rarely that tidy. What I want to explore is the mindset behind permanence. Because at its core, a tattoo is a commitment. A visible, physical declaration that says, "This is part of me." And some people are deeply comfortable with that. Others hesitate, not out of fear, but out of reflection. If you've never gotten a tattoo, you might have a strong future-oriented mind. Some people live mostly in the present. Others constantly project themselves forward. They imagine themselves at 40, 60, 80. They ask, "Will I still love this then?" Your brain might naturally simulate long-term scenarios before making decisions. Psychologists call this prospection, the ability to mentally time travel into the future. Research shows that some individuals engage this system more intensely. They don't just think about tomorrow. They think about decades from now. So when someone suggests a tattoo, your brain doesn't just see ink. It sees aging skin, changing tastes, future identities. And instead of feeling excitement, you feel hesitation. Not because you're rigid, but because you're temporally aware. There's also something else. Identity fluidity. Some people experience their identity as stable and clearly defined. This is who I am. Others experience identity as evolving, shifting, expanding. If you've never gotten a tattoo, you might intuitively understand how much you change. Think about who you were 5 years ago. Different music. Different priorities. Different beliefs. If that's obvious to you, you may resist locking any single version of yourself onto your body. It's not indecision. It's humility about your own evolution. You don't see yourself as a finished product. You see yourself as a draft. And that's rare. There's also the trait of internalized identity versus externalized identity. Some people feel a strong desire to display their stories outwardly. Tattoos become narratives, tributes, symbols, reminders. It's embodied storytelling. But if you've never felt that urge, you might carry your identity internally. You don't feel a need to broadcast who you are. You're comfortable with your meaning being private. Your sense of self doesn't depend on visible markers. That doesn't mean you lack depth. It might mean your depth feels self-contained. Let's talk about risk. Even though tattoos are common now, they still carry a mild element of risk. Physical discomfort. Potential regret. Social perception shifts depending on culture or career. If you've never gotten one, you might score higher in risk aversion, or more accurately, in consequence sensitivity. Your brain might weigh long-term outcomes heavily. Studies in behavioral psychology show that some individuals have stronger activation in brain regions linked to loss aversion. The potential downside feels more emotionally vivid than the potential gain. So instead of thinking, "This would look cool," your mind asks, "What if I regret it?" And here's the interesting part. That same trait often shows up in other areas of life. Financial caution. Careful relationship decisions. Thoughtful career moves. It's not about fear. It's about deliberate processing. But there's another layer most people don't consider. Body autonomy sensitivity. Some individuals have a very strong sense of bodily integrity. They feel deeply connected to the idea that their body should remain as it is, unaltered unless necessary. It's subtle, hard to articulate, but it feels almost sacred. For them, permanence on the body carries weight beyond aesthetics. It feels symbolic, serious. They may feel a quiet comfort in leaving their body untouched, not out of judgment toward others, but out of alignment with themselves. Now let's flip the lens inward. Maybe you've simply never felt strongly enough about anything to mark it permanently. And you've wondered if that means you lack passion. But here's another perspective. Maybe your passions are intense, but transient. You dive deep into interests. You love fully. You believe strongly. But you allow yourself to change without apology. That flexibility can look like hesitation from the outside. But internally it's freedom. You don't want to fossilize a feeling. And let's not ignore the social element. In some environments, tattoos are nearly expected. They signal creativity, rebellion, individuality. So choosing not to get one can quietly reflect nonconformity. Ironically, in a culture where self-expression through ink is normalized, remaining unmarked can be its own form of quiet rebellion. You're saying, "I don't need a symbol to validate my uniqueness." That takes a certain internal confidence. Of course, there are simpler explanations too. Maybe you just don't like needles. Let's be honest, sometimes psychology isn't that deep. But even that can reflect something interesting. Pain tolerance isn't just physical. It's psychological. Some people see discomfort as a worthwhile exchange for meaning. Others see it as unnecessary if the outcome isn't essential. Different cost-benefit analyses. Different wiring. I also want to touch on sentimentality. You might deeply value memories, relationships, milestones, but prefer to keep them in photos, journals, or your mind. Some people externalize memory through objects or symbols. Others internalize it. If you're in the second group, your memories feel secure without physical anchors. You trust your mind to hold them. And here's something philosophical. Choosing not to get a tattoo might reflect comfort with impermanence. That sounds paradoxical, doesn't it? But think about it. Instead of trying to freeze a moment in ink, you allow moments to pass. You let identities shift. You accept that who you are today isn't who you'll always be. There's a quiet acceptance there. Almost Buddhist, if we're being dramatic. Now, I want to be careful. None of this makes one group deeper or wiser than the other. Psychology isn't about ranking choices. It's about understanding motivations. But if you've ever felt slightly odd for never getting a tattoo, maybe it's worth reframing. Maybe you're highly future-oriented. Maybe you're identity fluid. Maybe you're cautious in a thoughtful way. Maybe you hold meaning privately. Maybe your sense of self is stable enough that you don't feel the need to display it. Or maybe you just genuinely like your skin the way it is. And that's enough. What fascinates me most is how such a small decision, ink or no ink, can reveal how differently human brains operate. Some of us carve our stories into the visible world. Others carry them quietly inside. Some declare. Others reflect. Some commit outwardly. Others evolve inwardly. Neither is superior. Both are human. So if you've never gotten a tattoo, instead of seeing it as a lack of boldness, maybe see it as a clue. A clue about how you process permanence. How you approach identity. How you think about time. And if you do have tattoos, you might recognize the opposite traits in yourself: comfort with declaration, attachment to symbolic anchors, a love for embodied storytelling. It's all data. All insight. The real question isn't, should I get a tattoo? It's, what does my hesitation, or enthusiasm, say about how I move through life? Because your choices, even the small aesthetic ones, are rarely random. They're patterns. And patterns tell stories. So I'm curious. If you've never gotten a tattoo, what's your real reason? Has it changed over time? And if you have, what did that decision mean to you psychologically? Let's talk about it. Because the more we unpack these everyday behaviors, the more we understand something much bigger, the architecture of who we are. And that's a story worth exploring, with or without ink.